Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. I'm your host, Sir Stephen Topham, the third at your service. We're going to acknowledge my grandfather's how he solved most of the railway's issues, right? Because it's a serious conversation and a good way of expressing to you what's happening at the North Norfolk Railway. It's not in my control at the moment. So what I want you to do is listen to a minute at one moment in your time or in one moment in time and acknowledge we know it comes from Whitney Houston, we know it's a song, we know it's a title and it's a meaning as well. But I want you to really focus on this, really harsh on this one, that Sir Topham Hatt the first always knows how to solve these little problems. These problems come every generation. We have to deal with it, right? We have to acknowledge that the North Norfolk Railway will not drop their guard until they realise they are a bunch of nincompoops. Excuse my French. Not all of them, but some. You will end up bumping into nice ones, you're bumping into nasty ones, you're bumping into this, you're bumping into that. I don't want to play games, right? Because the game situation is over, right? One moment in time, my grandfather knew exactly how to deal with you lot, right? He's gone, he's buried, he's deceased, right? The third generation has to do the same scenario. So, if it's acknowledging what is unfolding in front of you, it's acknowledging that the North Norfolk Railway prices will never drop, not just for one person. They have to acknowledge it for the whole community and the 8 billion around the world. Now, over the time I know the North Norfolk Railway, I know them to be well respected and everything else. That's gone, right? I'm acknowledging it to you because I don't want you to spend that type of money on there when it's a 2.5 mile radius to 5 mile radius total to actually realise, holy smokes, a 5 mile journey costs that much. And I don't want you as a customer to go on there, pay the price they're asking, right? Take it from somebody that knows the bloody place. Excuse my French, like myself, of course, or my grandfather before me. Right? We're acknowledging that what is unfolding in front of you is acknowledging the fact that we, as a community, and the Hats know everything they do wrong. Right? It's like the North Norfolk Railway doesn't care if you go on it or not, right? If you don't go on it, it saves you money, saves you time, and then you could go somewhere else and enjoy something that's more in your liking or your convenient liking. The North Norfolk Railway has turned the whole thing upside down. So initially makes it look like a pitiful railway that you can know of, right? In my time, right, my grandfather's time, he knew how to fix these little problems. These little tiny pieces do come in shapes and sizes. They do come in time. But we haven't got him, so you got me. So work it out. His only grandson that can solve all this problem has to deal with the problem they have at the North Norfolk Railway or the North Western Railway Company. We have to acknowledge the customer's needs. But I'm not letting you go there on there with the high prices they ask you for. Right? So you strip it all down. What does the prices do for you? Right? I'm looking at it from the community's angle, not the other way. Right? The community itself wants the better value, but they want it a little bit cheaper because you're only doing a 5 mile radius. Right? A 5 mile radius. Excuse me, I hate to say it, it is 5 miles, right? It's not 15 or 20 or something that the North sharing them to Norwich does in the end, because you're going through Cromwell or Wellsworth, all the way to Knapford, and then all the way to Orsted. Then you've got all of those stations, right? From A to B, right? A lot of people are not thinking, right? And I want this to be notified, right? 2.5, 2.5 equals this middle point, right? Within that 2.5 mile radius, right, like from Wellsworth to Marin or Sheringham to Rayborn, acknowledge it's a short distance, right? The North Norfolk Railway are not going to make money on that because the money situation is too high. Even for a customer to pay out that much, that's too much. So realistically, the North Norfolk Railway are not connected to any more stations besides the ones they got, right? We acknowledge that. We acknowledging that 2.5, right, is it's a lot of it's a very short distance, right? Right? When you walk it or when you're walking down that line, it does take longer, don't get me wrong, right? When the railway was at its point, primary point, its peak point in history, we acknowledge that 2.5 is like 2 miles from Sheringham to Cromwell or Wellsworth to Knapford. That's 2 miles, right? When you think about it, right, it costs less than what the North Norfolk Railway is asking for you, right? The North Norfolk Railway sees it itself as a company. Well, it isn't. You've got to realise it can't be both. You can't have the voluntary side and the company side. Doesn't work. You have to split it. You have to realise, right? This is why the management that booted everyone out in the first place made a big mistake, right? When you acknowledge that 2.5 against 2.5 to equalise it into where you need to go, right? We have to acknowledge to the world, acknowledge to the community, you can't go to that place because it's too expensive. The events themselves, right? I'm not being discriminative, but the fact it's not about what people's wants are, it's needs. And when I look at people's needs, I said, okay, you need this. I'm going to be honest with the community because I'm on their side against the North Norfolk Railway. At the moment, the North Norfolk Railway are not waking up to smelling the coffee and realise, oh boys, exactly, Thomas, at every angle, and acknowledging there is something about it. Right? A lot of people know exactly from right from wrong. Right? A 2 mile journey from from Wellsworth into Knapford is 2 miles journey. Right? Now, when I stated prices in my podcast of prices, right, and acknowledging you out there in the Greater Anglia Department and the North Norfolk Railway and comparing that, you can go to that podcast. It's under prices, the rise of the hatch, the prices. You can look up this. It's right on there in your category, right? And it explains and acknowledges everything, right? I don't want the customers to come out crying wolf, saying this is a bad railway it is. I want them to be acknowledged the prices are terrible. Don't get me wrong, the prices for the North Norfolk Railway are enormous at this time of year, right? They don't realise what they gained is what they lost in the first place. So you have to work out how do you fix a little problem, which is actually a bigger problem in the end, to acknowledge the factor of it, right? The community will say a lot of things, right? The facts are proof is in the pudding, right? The thing is, you have to realistically look at it. When I go to, let's say, Wellsworth to Marin, as example, let's need 2.5, right? You have to be realistic and acknowledge every mile, right? Rayborn, which is Marin in my case, I know exactly where you go, where you want to travel, and I want you to be well respected, right? The Norfolk area are not going to get that straight away now. They lost that respect, right? A lot of people got really PO'd, right? Pissed off, excuse my French, but there you go. But the thing is, the logic there is knowing from right from wrong. What can the management do to make it easier for you? Now, if I was there, I would have given you the easy way out all the time to fix this little problem where it's not too big, not too small, too very good. I could sort it out, right? If the people are not happy with the prices about it, I'm acknowledging your acknowledgement, right? I'm acknowledging that you want this way to flourish, right? You want it to grow back up. You're starting at the bottom. You're a bulb, right, before the tree blooms, right? That's how I see the Norfolk Railway. Back at the start, right? They don't need high prices right now. They don't, right? Let's say the Norfolk Railway from 10 years from now managed to extend their line all the way to Holt into Melton Constable, right? That's nearly it, right? That's 10 miles from my location, and it goes boom, boom, money's worth, right? The factor is in the pudding. The proof is in the pudding. So if the North Norfolk Railway managed to get to Melton Constable, then the price is worth. Why? Because you could say, right, a lot of people are criticising on the prices, right? Which I acknowledge, and I'm trying to acknowledge it now for you. I say it's a rip off now, but when they extend the line to Melt Constable, that's it. Ding ding. Then you start to add the money in, push the money up. But the factor is the prices aren't right at the moment to acknowledge that one moment in time, my grandfather knew every step of what you're doing now. Right? I don't need to jump in. Right? I know exactly what you're doing before you jump in the hot pot. Right? I'm not going to give out how I know. It's because that it's a family secret. But overall, one moment at a time, ding, 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 you're starting to work out, oh, right, there's something what they don't get. It's the logic that I'm also going to acknowledge all the heritage railways that are doing day out of Thomas right now. You've disgraced me and you've disgraced my family, right? You're a bunch of all bullshitters to the point, right? I'm acknowledging to them the hat is in Norfolk. Ding ding, right? I want you to be acknowledged by that, obviously, by fact. The proof is in the pudding, right? We try to acknowledge to everybody's needs, right? I am pushing the ethics in, right? When we talk or acknowledge what is understood, right? When we acknowledge about what your needs and wants are, right? Right? We acknowledge everything that goes on, We acknowledge that there's one moment in time when my grandfather had to deal with all of this. Sir Topham had the first. He knew every action you're about to do today. He's dead now, but I'm his only last surviving descendant. But I'm not the only last descendant in the family. Why? Because you've got my son Richard and you've got my granddaughter Emily. Now wake up and smell the coffee on this. This is reality. One moment in time, we knew exactly what you're doing. Right? We acknowledge that things that you see, how many of you want a good price, but you don't want to pay £200 or 150 quid or £100 or £70 or £60 or £50? You want it in the £50 range, obviously. People that find the way that at this moment, right, the North Norfolk Railway will never respect the community because they lost it. They just cannot see the better value of what they got and what they haven't got, or what they gained and what they improved, and acknowledge that there is something wrong about it, right? The proof is in the pudding. And the reason why I'm acknowledging that, while it's still one moment in time, that you're going to acknowledge this and realize what is 2.5 plus 2.5 equals 5 mile journey, and acknowledge that the community wants cheaper prices right now. When you deem with a 5 mile route, it's nothing compared to a 20 mile route or a 25 or 30 mile route. But when you're talking about to King's Cross all the way to Holt, as example, right? Everybody should know this inside and out and acknowledge that there's more. My grandfather would have known everything about this, right? He's dead, he's buried, he's gone. You can't get replace the Hatt except myself, because I'm his only grandson, right? Third gen of the Hatts. Ding ding, right? So what you need to realise, wake up and smell the coffee. People around the community understand where I'm coming from and acknowledge what is unfolding. They acknowledge about the prices. They acknowledge about the railway, how bad the railways become. And what the bad thing is going is that the railways can't help themselves because they booted out somebody that could unfold that natural course of problem. Right? My grandfather knew I was in charge. Yes. He knew that I was going forward. Yes. The, in the day, he knew that I was going to take over the North Norfolk Railway and making sure it stays safe. But he doesn't want no bull BS. That's the starter. So you continue with one moment in time when you think, how did you know about everything that's unfolding? I said, everybody knows it, but we do not establish where, why, or how. Right? We just give out information, right? We acknowledge that the community needs something, but to really know what your needs are and what their needs are, two different categories, right? But then you've got to balance it out right to get it right. You know, you can't just acknowledge what has the community done since the problems we had and the lockdown and all of that. That's bullshit, right? Everything nearly came to a standstill for the railway itself. So acknowledge, why would you pay so much for a 5 mile trip? My grandfather saw it, Sir Topham had the first, plus myself. My father did not know nothing about it, Charles Topham had the second. I acknowledge to you that you definitely need to think instead of actually thinking like Why does this railway exist? Ask yourself the question, right? Connections, right? If William Marriott was still around today, right, he won't be impressed as much as my own flesh and blood won't. Why? Because they are connections, they are friends, and they are always working together. Marriott and Hatt, we always work together, right? So we acknowledge that when the whole thing comes together, the whole full whack on one moment at a time, even in their faction, we know exactly what's going on up there without having to jump in with a gun and say you're fired, you're out, you're gone, kaput. We don't want that, but what we want you to acknowledge, the prices are so enormously high because whatever they're trying to gain is not, it's the complete opposite to what should be doing. And when you look at the prices and look at the prices podcast, you understand why. But there's a lot more to it than what it looks, right? There was one moment in time that you have to put yourself and realise the grandson, myself, Sir Topham the third, takes over and becomes the fat controller of the Norfolk Railway to make sure you get the treatment you need and respectively need and get the right price for the right distance. The distance is what the Norfolk Railway is boosting up the money for, right? When they do this on a day to day basis, not everybody looks and realises, okay, are we looking at this? If he's, I'm saying the proof is in the pudding, right? We're acknowledging that. So, proof is in the pudding and the facts come out. And what I want you to realise, there's too much money on that railway, right? For 5 mile, you really need to prioritise. Really, look down. Are you benefiting from travelling like 5 miles there, 5 miles back? That's 10 miles, right? People get bored after a while and realise there is nothing else to do but wait, right? A lot of people say, look, oh, I like this station, they did this service and they do that service. Right in your minds, when you go on that platform and realise there's one moment in time where people, well respected, said, we help you get this far and you fucking, excuse my French, you've destroyed it, right? It's not the community's fault. It's not the last employers employees' faults, or the volunteers' fault because they were victims, right? So acknowledge that the point is you've got so much up there where it's not needed to price high. You have to work at the mileage, which is 5 miles. You got really got to balance it out in your head, and you got 2.5 against 2.5, right? Which equals 5 miles, right? If it went all the way to Milton Constable, which is the centre point of everything that the Norfolk Railway should get his head around, right? Right? They're getting community grants, they're getting support, they're getting aid, they're getting everything, right? There's no need to put those prices up. There was one moment in time where you had to think logically, where would you be if you messed up the railway about a year from now, or 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, and you screwed up so bloody badly, excuse my French, and ending up realizing you screwed up, right? Right? The biggest problem is you have to be realistic on what you see is what you get, but at the same time, the customers know the prices are too high. The customers or the community as a whole knows the prices are too high. They're not going to benefit because they're not from from where you're standing, or as the administration team or the porters or guards, they don't realise what they're getting. What they're doing is a bit of this and a bit of that, and understanding this and understanding that, and that put together, A and B and C. You got three stations, obviously, and then you got the pothole in the end, right? We acknowledge that the Killing Heath is not actually a station, right? But it was on direct route. So take the three main stations. You got Wellsworth, Marin, and the coastal one route. Right? Acknowledge that you, in the day you got Sheringham, Rayborn, and Holt. Right? People want to push the railway longer. Right? Will make their money. Then the North Norfolk Railway's prices, what they are now, would have been benefit for that route. So when it goes to Hull and goes into Milton Constable, that's it. The prices will be then just be dead right. Why? Because, oh, right, let's say that you got in Milton Constable, right? And they charging nearly £20, £21 as example, right? It will go all the way to Sheringham for that price. Now, if you were going through Sheringham to Holt at the moment, because remember the station of Holt used to be that bypass. This is why one moment in time, while my grandfather knew the right way to get you going, right? Even I do. I don't bullshit by the bush, so nor did he. And they'll be telling you the same story. We're telling you the outcome, the outline, and the outcomes of what we do, right? I want you to feel comfortable on that railway without no discrimination, no rudeness, no selfishness, nothing. We just need to get that prices dropped and moderated in time. Obviously, as you go through spring, summer, autumn, and winter, plus the months, plus the days, then you're adding it all up, right? There is a lot what people can't see in one moment in time. In that moment in time, you're starting to wonder why. The proof is in the pudding. That's really dead on the money, right? I'm telling you that the North Norfolk Railway is not worth visiting right now. You got a 5 mile route. If they were going to Milton Constable directly from that location, the money will be just dead right because they do more distance. When you got a 5 mile route, it's not even worth that price. So when you got 2 mile route, as example, from like Sheringham to let's say Wellsworth to Knapford, it gets click click. Right, that's 2 miles alone. Right. So realistically, when you look at the maps of today, there's not much changes or differences or anything. Right. I told the North Norfolk Railway long ago before they booted me out because they thought I was just a normal volunteer, which I wasn't. I'm a hat. So work it out. They screwed up there and then. But the fact is, they got a level crossing they could use day after day. Why every day they could use that to their advantage and make what they could have done with the greater angler with respect is acknowledge that they could have gone into Cromer for slicing Knapford every, let's say, if it was the whole day that they do, the North Norfolk Railway in general, why, I'm being honest with the people around you, and I want you to take this under consideration and a notification, right? The only time that level crossing gets used is when a special train comes in from the main line. right? The main line pass they normally have for every engine, especially on the locomotives, especially that includes. I said Greater Anglia only goes up to what to the other end of that platform, and they don't go into Sheringham Station directly of the North Norfolk Railway, which they could have done and really and connect up and destroy the whole halt, the other side of the station, and acknowledge that it was a waste of money in the past. It's wasted money now. What did they do? History repeats itself. So acknowledge it's third generation, and I am the third gen fat controller, and acknowledge that what you'll get out at the moment, you've got a 5 mile route for the North Norfolk Railway, and they could cross over that level crossing without no problems, right? The Network Rail in general would have had more respect for that level crossing. It may cost them a lot of money, and the North Norfolk Railways had a little helping hand to pay for it as well, but they should have equal motives to use it to go to Knapford / Cromer. Ding ding. So what happens? They would have gained, right? North Norfolk Railway would have gained 2 more stations, which they previously owned before it was the North Norfolk Railway in the 70s. So work it out backwards and go forward. It will click. Right? When it was the 60s, the level crossing was taken out. And I want to acknowledge that. Should they left it there? The answer, yes. Because by now, when they paid that much for the level crossing in 2010 or 2011, they in March. I remember the day when Oliver Cromwell crossed over, and I acknowledged it, right? And I acknowledged that I was the witness, and I would tell you now, I witnessed that event, and I acknowledged it, right? I said to my mother, dog to a hat, that that level crossing should never been taken out. BS about the timing, right? That could have saved that type of money, and that money could be used for something else that was needed, not a want. So when you look at it in the 60s, everybody thought that steam was going to be the end of the era. The end of the era, uh-uh. You got to acknowledge the proof is in the pudding, right? So now I'm telling you, right? The Network Rail really should have said to the North Norfolk Railway, you could go directly into Cromer whenever they needed, right? That it would have extended the whole line all the way there, right, and backwards, right? And in the day, when you look at the timetable of the North Norfolk Railway, you only got Sheringham, Weybourne, and Holt, right? Which is Walsworth, Marin, and the Coastal One route. Bang, right? You have to be realistic now. You've got Crosby and Knapford connected, right? You're not going directly all the way to Norwich, that's for sure, right? This is the one thing where the money would have been benefit, where the money would have been proven to say, look, why put something back in that was taken out in the 60s? Now, if it was left there as a single track and everything else, the DMUs that were used in Anglo Railways and One and Greater Anglo, it don't matter what company it is. The problem is whatever Network Rail needs, say, oh, you can't travel on this line because you have to have a steam pass or a locomotive pass to do it, right? That's BS, right? I want you to go down the route course and look at it. There'll be one moment in time where you will look back at this and realise something isn't right. But you corrected the problem, but it costs you money. So, why did, when you look at Dr. Beecham today, he's not a saviour, he's a destroyer. And when you think of Dr. Beecham, do you actually see him grovelling for one station and grovelling for the other? Oh, he made a little slip up there and then, which I will never forget. Right? I don't need to read any of his books because what he did wrong was wrong. Right? But the government had a lot to play in this. So, work it out. When something was set in motion, a lot of things, even in my grandfather's era, he knew exactly what was going to be cut out, what was going to be wise. He knew that I was going to play a part in this. He knew that I was going to take over where he left off, and I'm doing the exact job that he's doing. Right? I want you, as the community out there, and the customers, to realise what is why one moment in time. It's very important, right? So when you look at the past and the present and all of that shebang, what should have been left alone, but could have been advantage to the Norfolk Railway before 2019. You have 2018, you have 2017, you have 2016, you have 2015 and 14 of going down backwards, and then you're ending up realizing, okay, what could they done that would have prevented all the tragedy here? Why? In the 60s, when they took that level crossing out, they should never done it. Dr. Beecham was a complete waste of space. Right? Just remember that he's not there anymore. Right? I am recorrecting this problem and and it's a really big problem in general. I said the proof is in the pudding, but there's one moment in time when you think, should that level crossing should have stayed there when the Norfolk Railway were going to use it in 2011, and now what's happened? When they took that out in the 60s, right? I'll be honest, you had to wait nearly 45 years or plus before you can even gain it back. It didn't feel right because the North Norfolk Railways got cheated out, the Greater Anglia got cheated out, can't even use the level crossing either one way or other, right? And the level crossing is like standing there like a pedestal, like an achievement put back in place, right? Would you benefited it? Now, this is a question to all the community out there to realise, wake up and smell of coffee here. What happens if the Norfolk Railway and the railway companies of the British Rail Company, which I know about, I'm not joking on this one either, or the rail network, would have known and said, should, should the railway then what it is now, right? When it was then, any railway engine can go on that rail to Primer, or Knapford as I call it, and acknowledge it to make sure that you are in a position to say you can use that level crossing whenever you want. Right? It's a needy, not a wanty. Think out of the head, right? You're adding 2 more miles to the route, right? Doesn't matter. The problem is that level crossing is the advantage tool. I acknowledge that it was taken away from you in the 60s, right? Which it should have not been done, right? People that took it away from you in the first place would have been a moneymaker right then. So then the people that took over the North Norfolk Railway in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, which I will clarify it all over, right? My grandfather had to wait, but when my time came along, then it became a new beginning, a new era, right? I remember the day. I remember like it was yesterday. I don't bullshit. I don't. I get straight to the point and acknowledge, right? When the railways are ripped up, right, there are a lot of advantages that the North Norfolk Railway, NWR, or the North Western Railway Company, had more advantages now, but disadvantages now. But they got advantage to use that level crossing, right? All they had to do is prioritise with the Greater Wrangler or whatever railway company is taking over the other branch line, put that side of that branch line, and realise that one moment in time could be a right, not just a money making job, but have the advantage. Norwich, Orsted, as I call it, Norwich has more platforms to use, right? Right? Norwich could really do with a steam engine there. I'm not bullshitting by the bush on this one, and I'll be honest with you, right? A turntable, right? If I know the platforms that well, right, Orsted could have had the turntable on the other side, the sidings, as we call it, right? That would be an extra turntable to get one locomotive to be swapped round and used, right? Then it will still have the disadvantage because you will have to have one in Cromer, which is no longer available to us, or Knapford, to realise a supermarket, which people's needs are, would have been. You've got so many supermarkets, I would have said, right, Morrison's in general is basically a waster, right? Morrison's, like in general, would have kept Cromer Beach, or Cromer as you like to call it now, advantage tool. But when you think about each station, every department, right, there is things about it that would help a lot of people out. So, like, when you look at the 60s and look at today, right, besides the level crossing in Sheringham, right, or Wellsworth, right, we knew that was a money waster, right? But at the time when it was the 60s and it was pulled up, what happened if that action was been saying leave the level crossing there as a single line? What would have happened if it was in reverse? What would the North Norfolk Railway be then? Right? So we're taking off 10, 20, 30 years backwards because we have to acknowledge it was my grandfather's time as well as my father's time and then myself. Right? I want you to feel like there's one moment in time where you actually think he's right. There are a lot of things that we are mistaken on. There are people that are willing to go further and further, but if the rail network themselves put their heads in their head, start prioritising and start thinking, right? It's like I said, the Morrison's supermarket was Cromer Beach's main terminus for sidings. Why? Because you had a turntable and everything else, right? We acknowledge that's gone, right? We have to accept that the supermarket's on top of it, so we can't do nothing with it, right? Mistakes that we're relearning from the past, as well as past mistakes. But I also have to acknowledge, as we grow, each generation needs something rather than the wants. So when we look at it, everything that the North Norfolk Railway is now, where it's a 5 mile journey, it can't cross over that level crossing, right? I prove you could go over it, right? It's acknowledging it to make sure that you get that extra 2 mile journey, right? Which is only go to Cromer / Knapford. But what you have to realise, what could have been done to save money and avoid the cost. Why? People said it's a remarkable achievement, which I agree with. Why? But there was one moment in time when you look back and realise my grandfather knew about this before he passed away. It's acknowledging that factor which was passed on to me. Acknowledge the fact that there is more to it than the naked eye. So when you think, oh, the Norfolk Railway and the rail network paid nearly 5 million quid, or nearly something like that, to connect the line up, right? That would have been left alone in the 1960s, right? It doesn't matter about the rail involvement at that time when electric trains were very popular during the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, the DMUs and all of that, then you realise they fade out as much as the steamies did. But the thing is, the steamies and the diesels are still popular today because they are the boundary of everything we know, right? But it's also a boundary of understanding what is a need and got it, right? What the 60s and today's offer is very different to what they are, right? The North Norfolk Railway are not going to back down yet. I'm just waiting for them to drop because it's one moment in time they will have to face that consequences and realise the prices are too high. They are extremely high. The customers won't pay that unless they're getting more value for their money. But a 5 mile trip will not it's not beneficial, right? So if you really look at it today, what could they achieve on their timetable compared to the Greater Angler, right? The Greater Angler, maybe HS2 or HS1 locomotives going down that line. Why? What I established is if they could speed into Cromer, blah blah blah, going down that line, I want the North Norfolk Railway to realise they could cross that railway line over that level crossing now as they did in the 50s and 60s and the 40s, acknowledging that that was a mistake that was taken out. Yes, I totally agree. So did my grandfather. We acknowledge that and making sure you use that level crossing because that railway line normally is dead to a point. Why? Because they basically the electric trains have to wait. They need more customers. They need this. They need that. Acknowledge that what is happening now is what is unfolding right now. It's a little bit of a boundary to say, look, well, it's like saying to the North Norfolk Railway, I bet all the employers even have that same question today. They want the acknowledgement of it because they want something that they need, they want to use more of. Because in the day you pay that amount of money to reinstate that level crossing and acknowledge you've got to start using it more. But it has to come from their end, not the Greater Angler or the Rail Network Department. They need that or want to use it more. I said Britain Line, which is under classified as, they don't realise why does the North Norfolk Railway want to use that, abuse the prices without acknowledging that there's two stations ahead of them or behind them, as they call it. Through my it's from my understanding, they got West Wanton, they got Knapford, they got West Wanton as Crosby, then they got Wellsworth. Right? When they left, when the railway has a permit, right? This is why I don't like cheaters for a license to cross over that line. Right? BS that and acknowledge what was once theirs is still theirs today. Because I want you to be acknowledged it's your line, not the Greater Anglers, not the rail networks. Why? Because when it goes from Knapford to Wellsworth, which is right going into Cromer restaurant and eat then sharing them itself, that's the North Norfolk Railway line because that's their line. Right? It's like saying you don't need a permit to travel on that part of the line because sometimes when the timetable of Greater Anglia is different to the North Norfolk Railway line, you're adding the stations above or else. But the thing is, I'm saying it's your need as well as the Greater Anglia's needs. But they could done you a big favour and say, what, you could use that part of the line because we don't often stop there or we don't go there because we don't have enough customers or it's like extending the line that's already there, right? And if the rail network and says you need a rail permit to use that part of the line, BS it because there's not a money making situation there. Besides, the tourists could use that as the advantage, where the money could be approved, where we understand the value of the proof is in the pudding. So we got to acknowledge that, and more, we need to get the North Norfolk Railway to understand that level crossing is not what you call, it's not a monument that stands still. Use it and use it to their advantage. Because sometimes when you got that rail permit, that's a load of BS. Right? Acknowledge that what was the North Norfolk Railway's line is theirs. Right? They want to use it, they use it. Right? I don't like people saying, like, when I was discussing earlier on the podcast about money and prices and acknowledging what is a need, what is a want, and everything else. I try to help people as much as I can. I know the prices are high just for 5 mile route. Add another 2 miles to it. Right? Go through to West London to Cromer. Right? It may it benefits it because you're acknowledging something that was taken out in the 60s, which it should not done, right? Probably in the 70s, in the 80s, and the 90s, that could have been the biggest advantage they would have had in the Norfolk Railway to realise, oh, we've got the level crossing still there, not ripped up, blah blah blah, and acknowledge, okay, we have to come to an agreement to use the other half of the line. But you don't want a rail permit on your sidelines to say, why is people willing to help you out, Norfolk Railway? You need to work it in your heads. The employers and the employees have to work out why have the level crossing as a monument during the year and we only use it once or twice a year. Where you got 2 more stations that are physically dead to a point, right? Make them feel like they're part of the North Norfolk Railway. Make it feel like it's part of Greater Anglia. Make it a joint, but make it a connection where the North Norfolk Railway can use that level crossing every day. Make more of the money. When you say you want to abuse the people's money, well, at the moment they seem that it's too expensive because it's a 5 mile route. If you add a 2 mile route added to it, you're adding 7 miles to the route, right? Acknowledge that it could be more benefit to the community in the end during the summertime. More trains going A and B like a train going left, right, and centre, right? But it gives them advantage. It gives them a connection to vitally use. Right? It will give them high hopes that if the money at the moment is a big factor key in all of this. One moment in time where people will look up to you and realise that the North Norfolk Railway has ended up screwing people up because without realising there's a bigger, not fish or fried or whatever you want to call it. It's the acknowledgement that I am making the longest podcast on this because it's one moment in time my grandfather knew everything you're about to do, and I'm here to clear it all up. Right? The rail pass or the locomotive pass, which allows the locomotive to cross that level crossing and sharing them, is you don't need it. Right? All you're doing is crossing over onto your old line. Why? Which is why I said Sheringham to Cromer is the North Norfolk Railway's line. They're entitled to use it. So I'm just giving them an open door. I said people will appreciate it more. They will understand the reason why the prices have gone up. At this moment, you've got nothing to offer them except money, money, money. Always funny. And it's not always funny. You know what I mean? So when you think about of it in the 60s and the 50s, when the railway locomotives used to cross over that line, even the derelict ones that got repaired and everything else, like the Y14 and or as I classify it as the J15, and acknowledge that it's got a K2 format. Obviously, we won't go into that. That was what was hiding. Obviously, you can look up into that podcast as well, and acknowledge that what you're seeing is not what the customers want or need. So, what you need to understand from a distance to the value, the cost, and the money, right? A 5 mile trip, 2.5 to 2.5 equals the middle, right? Then you've got to work out the actual outcome of why do we need to extend a 2 mile radius extra for us. I said, if you don't look at it, you don't realise you're using that level crossing as a monument at the moment. The North Norfolk Railway can't use it, nor can Greater Anglia. Right? It's an open door policy forward, and I am acknowledging it to make sure that the customers get the best value of their money. They don't want to acknowledge. They could have gone into Cromer for this. They could have gone into Holt for this. Go vice versa, vice versa, vice versa. But they have to acknowledge about the Greater Anglia timetable as well. When you look at the Greater Anglia timetable, right, they have a short time period. They have a long time period. Right? The North Norfolk Railway, it's only got three main stations. Now, if they add two more to that list, besides the Holt and Kelling, which is not included, think about it like an extension that was rightfully theirs. When you have to be realistically on the prices and it's established, they are too much right now. We established that. But the factor is the money has to be coordinated. It's saying, why is the Greater Anglia asking customers to pay from Cromer to Sheringham on its own? It's nothing to them. Why? Because they're only using that as an excuse. If you look at the vital key, the North Norfolk Railway have got high prices right now compared to Greater Anglia. They have more rights to extend that price higher off-peak and peak times. When it's a North Norfolk Railway, they're paying off-peak and off-peak times, right? And I acknowledge that it's not right at the moment. The price is not right, right? I need the North Norfolk Railway to understand, use your heads, use what you see, use what you got. Don't abuse it by leaving it as a monument. Right? When I see that level crossing not being used, right, I see it as a monument right now, not being used, not being corrected, and understand we had it taken out in 1960s, which it wasn't the North Norfolk Railway's fault, don't get me wrong, but if they left it, bang! How much money do you think the North Norfolk Railway would have made now? But there is one thing, which is why they don't understand everything they see, right? So acknowledge that you've got Cromer, West London, Sheringham, Weybourne, and Holt. Ding ding ding. Right? You've got more than 5 mile route there. You've got seven. Right? When you've got a 7 mile route, it makes it's not about the money factor is bloody too high. Excuse my language. It makes you wonder. It makes you think. Even my grandfather knew what was ahead of me. So work it out. He knew about everything. That's just had to unfold every piece. Right? We have to make you understand the value of the money they are asking for. It's not right. Right? We know that. I covered that in the prices, but I want to go a little bit into a little bit more of a depth in this because I want you to realise what else is at stake rather than just the money factor. Right? The mileage. We factorise it as fact two. Right? Then you have the level crossing, fact three. Right? Things are not been acknowledged. You don't need a locomotive pass to go over that level crossing. The level crossing should never been touched in the 60s. If it was left there, it would have been advantage to everybody. But no, you broke up. Let's say the previous generation thought what was thought they were doing right was wrong, right? You recorrected it in 2010 to 2011, right? Which I acknowledged. But the thing is, what could have been left alone could be the greatest asset, right? It's like acknowledging what could have been then, what it could have been now. The North Norfolk Railway would have had a lot more to be given, right? Because one moment in time, you right now they all screwed up, right? They can't acknowledge high prices to a 5 mile trip. Doesn't work like that, right? People don't realise it's a transport capability. They can't classify it as a company because it's the bloody. They can't have volunteers and a company working together. That doesn't work. Why? When it works with volunteers and because it's the volunteers that started it in the 70s. So acknowledge that. Why? The volunteers carried on, helped people bring in the money every time. If it wasn't for Devious Diesel pissing me off, excuse my French, he told me we are revolutionaries. Why? What did he do with the North Norfolk Railway? He revolutionaried it, right? He made it more modern, right? We acknowledge that the luggage room used to be the luggage area, right? I acknowledge that. But when people appreciated it in the past, they acknowledged that what could the North Norfolk Railway do right now more than to sit in front of their arse doing paperwork and acknowledge new volunteers coming and realise they're getting booted out as well and they're getting kicked ass in, out, shaken all about, and then they get really one moment at a time. Right? This has happened before in the 60s. So acknowledge 1969, everybody was fired or going to another depot and another bus. The Norfolk Way are doing the same transition, if you will. And they don't acknowledge that one moment in time they could have said, we make sure the Norfolk Railway was in good hands. I already got my granddaughter and my son on the line for it. Why? Because we're making sure that you don't mess up. Why? I appreciate what the Norfolk Railway are trying to do now, but it is not helping the situation. So we have to acknowledge that what you got right now, you got a level crossing that's a monument right now, not a laughing joke. For the community, it's not a laughing matter. For me, it's not a laughing matter. It's really like asking yourself, you got a permit right on the playing field, right? That permit could not be acknowledged to say, look, okay, you can have these two stations, right? To Greater Anglia, losing two stations could have been a great asset to the North Norfolk Railway, right? Are the Greater Anglia willing to give up two stations for the North Norfolk Railway? I'm asking that the Greater Anglia, the rail network, all of them, right? Use your heads for a moment. Use your damn heads. Just think about it. Are you willing to lose two stations and give them to the North Norfolk Railway? Two out of ordinary, right? Use Cromer, or what used to call it Cromer Beach, as a connection. So establish that you've got a two-layer track layer. I want it to be established two tracks, right? You really got to think on your heads on this one, guys, because this is reality as it's fact, right? When you look at old layouts and look at the new layouts, they haven't changed that much for Sheringham, Cromer, or West Swanton. There are a few modifications because you haven't got the sidings in Cromer no more, so they haven't got no turntable, whatever. So there will be a diesel involved that will help to bring in the community and the steamy, of course, and the vice versa, right? I want the Greater Anglia and the rail network rail, and the other department, and the North Norfolk Railway to realise we don't need a rail permit for this level crossing all these two stations, right? I want you, right, because by looking at one of my books that I do look into quite deeply, of course, right? Right, we call it the People's Crossing, right, or the level crossing, Sheringham, right? I want you to be acknowledged, right? Since you managed to put it back in, start using it, because if you're not going to use it, it's going to have that bloody problem with like the other railway lines do, right? Start using it more. Use it to prioritize everything, right? I'm acknowledging that it should have been left alone since June 1967 before they ripped it all up. You should have left it alone, full stop. Why? I'm acknowledging to you that if it was left alone in the 60s, right, the North Norfolk Railway would have had access to Cromer and West Swanton, which is Knapford and Crosby, right? I'm also acknowledging that with the money they're asking from the community as a whole, it doesn't balance out right. So when you look at the prices and look at the stations, do you think, from the Greater Anglia point of view and the rail network at the concerns, they could make something that can work? Of course, they might need a level cross. Let's say a level. Let's say a signal, right, where the points cross with the Norwich line and Cromer, right, which makes the connection, right. All it takes, if they ask, if you were all smart enough, and I know you're intelligent out there, and I know you got reasons to really say, look, okay, he has a point, and he's made it as a valid point, not as a bullshit point. You know what I mean? I'm making it an exception for you because there's one moment in time you took up something that should have not been taken up directly, obviously, right? We acknowledge. We also acknowledge that we have to put things right a little bit, right? But you got two stations that could be helpful to the Norfolk Railway in the circumstances they are in, right? They got Sheringham, they got Weybourne, they got Holt, but what can they do with the other two stations? Now, ask yourself, and it goes to the administration of the North Norfolk Railway team, right, or the management team there at the moment, and the Greater Anglia and the rail network. Work out, you've got a level crossing that's a monument right now. You're using it only once or twice a year, right? Use it more, push it more, but you need to start realizing what does Rail Network need with with Cromer and West Wanton as a whole. Just I'm gonna while you are thinking about it and really understanding where I'm coming from, right? Cromer and West Wanton. This say this in the right perspective for you guys. Yes, indeed, Thomas, in every angle. And I'm making it quite clear, Crystal, that I will not bullshit with the community on this one. Because in the day when you see the unfoldment of it, it's like understanding. I understand where Stephen Topham Hatt the third is coming from because he knows exactly what's unfolding. Exactly. But the thing before the thing, and then you got to say the proof is in the pudding. You got to acknowledge that because that's one thing they look into. You have to realize that you have a level crossing. No one can't use it unless they have a proof of the permit, right? Take away the permit, right? Because I'm acknowledging to Greater Anglia and the rail network, you could sacrifice two stations, right? But you don't have to sacrifice all of it. So you're not losing, you're gaining more, right? Because you're actually working alongside the Norfolk Railway to say, look, okay, you got two timetables. Let's flash those two timetables on the table, right? When you look at the timetable, right, both on both sides, on the North Norfolk Railway side and the Greater Anglia, right, when you compare the two timetables, who's got more stations than anything else, right? And be realistic. There's three stations on the North Norfolk Railway, and you've got on the Greater Anglia network, you basically got, or the Bitten line, as I call it, you've got these stations, right? You're basically going from Sheringham, West Runton, Cromer, all the way to Norwich, right? In some points and some ways of looking at it, and you really have to prioritise more, right? The North Norfolk Railway are charging too much, right? Whatever they're doing is, at this moment, is unforgivable, right? For the community, for the for the reason and understanding, right? So when you got that level crossing smack right in the middle, right? That level crossing should make a bonding trust between the companies plus the North Norfolk Railway, right? The Greater Anglia doesn't cross over that, right? But they could because they don't need a rail permit, right? They telling the North Norfolk Railway they got to use a rail permit to cross over to get to West Wanton and Cromer. Uh-uh. No, they're both equally allowed to use that level crossing, right? I'm going to make it honest. Honesty is the best policy with this category. I would say to you, if you put that in, you're re-establishing the connection that was taken out for so long ago. But you have to acknowledge they should never taken it out in the first place. So acknowledging it to you, when my grandfather was still around, he knew that the North Norfolk Railway should have had that connection there and then, right? They could work out a compromise to say we need West Runton and Cromer, but there could be a Cromer connection between the companies that are existing now, right? Every time the Greater Anglia are using that line, right, they screwed up, not realising what is more active stations and what is better stations and all that. We get the drill. They want to add a new station in, right? They have to sacrifice one to gain one. It's like a want turn need. And why telling them if they want an extra station put in, they have to give up one of theirs. It's like I said, you can't have one without the other. It's like saying you got Cromer, West London, and Sheringham, right? Which is totally the North Norfolk Railway's property, right? They can use that to their advantage right now. And we talk about level crossings as a blessing, right? It should not have been taken out in in this current form because it's just it's, to everybody else right now. It's the monument, which it should not be. It should be used on a day-to-day basis, like any railway should be. Doesn't matter if it's past, present, or future. It's trusting that level crossing gets used. Right? If you don't see it get used, the public are not going to be interested. You're going to have to make some what you call compromise as such and say, look, the rail pass or pass, what do you call them, or locomotive pass to say that yes, they could go over that level crossing, blah blah blah. No, it doesn't, because the level crossing is a bond connection for the Greater Anglia and the North Norfolk Railway. It's the North. That's why Sheringham level crossing should never been taken out in the first place. So if you work out all the mistake they did, and now they fixed it, right? You need to work it out in layman terms. The way people are thinking right now, they're probably thinking, "Oh shit, he's right." Yeah, Greater Anglia messed up, right? They don't even see the bigger picture. They can't see their most active stations to their deactivated stations. And now they plan to put another one in. No, thank you. They can leave it alone because in the day, the more they involved, what they need are not wants. They're gonna start asking, saying, "Okay, we will make agreeable pact with the North Norfolk Railway to let them use West Wanton and share it to Cromer, right? That will give them two extra stations on the North Norfolk Railway timetable rather than the Greater Anglia. The Greater Anglia will have Cromer all the way to Norwich. That gives them a connection, a grid that will make sure that the whatever the North Norfolk Railway prices are compelling, that will compromise it. basically they say one supports the other, but you got to look at the middle line here. That level crossing is not there just to rust. Why? Because when the track needs replacing, as example, and I know the North Norfolk Railway will end up saying, right, okay, we do it. I think we understand where he's coming from. It's the logic. And when you look at the North Norfolk Railway in the past, it was the level crossing should have been left alone. All it had to be do is a few modification here, there, and there to make it a single track, which they could have done in the 60s. So make sure about this and acknowledge what we are seeing right now. Right, it it pains, it breaks what they see. Right, so they're not seeing the need. Right, the prices on both accounts. Right, Greater Anglia may be the fastest local electric train around. Right, cheaper prices and all that, but in their heads, look at their timetable compared to the North Norfolk Roads at the moment, right? They're doing 5 mile, they're doing nearly 20-mile route, right? The North Norfolk Railway and the Greater Anglia or the rail network should make a compromise to realise let's use the Cromer station or the Cromer Beach station as the connection point because it's only one term. There's only two terminuses in general, right? The level crossing had to be used. It doesn't matter if it's the money or the faction. The point is the money is the money that the Greater Anglia are saying for two stations, as example, is cheaper where the North Norfolk Railway is doing only three, right? Plus the Killing Heath halt as well. We have to acknowledge that the prices will are too expensive for one thing and not acknowledging the other. So when you think of that level crossing, the community, you as a community out there, and the employees start thinking. Because you know I'm in the right, you know you got a problem, you want to fix it, you got to get me up there. It's like saying, I am the only thing that can see through what you're doing without acknowledging that what should have been left alone in the past could be the greatest connection right now without having to pay 5 million quid or £1,000 or whatever, or acknowledging that little piece of track could have been left alone in the 60s and still be advantage right to the 70s, 80s, and 90s. But then you ending up thinking, okay, that's one thing that could have been done and been left alone. So when the 60s and 90s were, when it was in the 60s, people thought the level crossing was unusable. And I'm going to say to the community now, that's bullshit. Because that would have been the advantage. The community thought was, oh, we don't need this, get rid of it. Right? Now the community are now thinking twice and said, might use their heads a little bit more now, saying, oh, that's been connected. Now, uh, to a lot of people, you may understand there was one moment in time where it was all thinking less of the games. It's all true, it's all logic, but it's all facts. So realistically, with the North Norfolk Railway or the North Western Railway Company, acknowledges that the level crossing is there, but to the Greater Anglia, they got a bigger problem. They got a bit in line that they can't fully control, and basically got this little problem where they got two stations that normally are dead, right, during the seasonal era. But what happens? if the North Norfolk Railway can help out. Now, if the North Norfolk Railway could just lower those prices to begin with, because that's number one on the list, then they will actually think about number two on the list. It's the connection. Why? From a, let's say, for a few, let's say 10 years from now, that level crossing that still is not being used properly the way it should. Right? The Greater Angler could be called a different company. It could be Greater Stupid, Greater Art, whatever. It's understanding that whatever name they go under, they will understand, oh, okay, the Britain line needs improvement here. We could get the North Norfolk Railway can use those two stations now. We could make an established connection in Cromer and acknowledge that when you look at these vital keys, you might find out that North Walsham could be their main connection and the actual, like the pinpoint connections, etc. You have to be realistic on what you see is what you're getting to a point, but acknowledging what can be improved for the railway and the North Norfolk Railway's prices to be lowered right now because they're only doing a 5 mile trip. When you think about that, then you can start thinking about why they increased it in the first place when they shouldn't done. A friend told me, and I'm going to quote, the proof is in the pudding. Right, that's quoted from a friend of mine, a private connection. But the thing is, when people noticed when things are taken away from them from the beginning of 1969, people thought the level crossing is the ultimate key. But this is why I called this podcast One Moment in Time, to make you understand the value of money as well as that connection. That connection is vital. But if the rail network are going to have this rail, what you call locomotive pass, it's like a ticket that the locomotives have, and they're not allowed to run on their own old line. Uh-uh. I would say you could go through there with no hesitations because there's facts among facts, and there's the answer there that you're not seeing, right? So when you look at it and look at backwards and forwards, realistically in your mind, right? In the day, you got to realise how many passengers actually get dropped off at Westwanton, how many passengers get dropped off at Cromer. Then you got to combine that together with the sharing them on the other side platform as well, because you've got to deal with the North Norfolk Railway crowd. And then you've got to think, okay, he has a valid point there. Why you have a high speed train coming in from Sheringham on one side of the platform, which makes no sense in any angle. Then you've got the North Norfolk Railway and their Sheringham station, or the North Western Railway Company, as I call it, and acknowledging that there always be a little catch in all of this. Right? When people know it's all true and you really think about it, ask yourself a very big question. Right? Right? When the level crossing was taken out in the 60s, they were the employees or the people that ripped it up in the first place are gonna basically their families are probably ending up regretting it right now because now it's been replaced with a similar setup. Right? Now you've got it back on track. Now use it. Don't abuse it. Because if you abuse the level crossing like it's a monument, like it's an achievement, and it's not being used correctly every day, you're losing out. Even the Greater Angler loses out because they screwed up because the rail network can't figure it out for themselves. Why is he coming out with this? It's all truth. It's all facts. It's all logic. It's all respect. You know what I mean? It's like saying to there's the proof is in the pudding because the facts are already set. All you have to realise is understand that that level crossing is not a monument, right? It has to be used on the North Norfolk Road or the Greater Anglia or the rail network itself will be starting to abuse that system. So they're abusing the system saying, oh, you need a locomotive ticket to get across on the line. What a load of BS on that. Because it doesn't, when they are dealing with their own former line, I remember exactly what will happen if you keep doing it the way they do. Right? A lot of locomotives out there, even heritage railways, shouldn't understand this, right? The rail network will always be the problem at this moment as a company, not thinking straight, not realizing what could be helpful in the times like the times of need. But this is not a times of need. This is getting to the point where why is the North Norfolk Railway are high priced for a 5 mile journey, and then you've got the Greater Anglia that basically doing a 20 mile trip from Orsted all the way to Sheringham and then ending up being on the other side of that level crossing, and they don't even realise there's more to it than just that. When it all used to be the way it should, why I want the community's opinion on this, right? By understanding the value that that level crossing is not to be abused today. Because if it gets abused again, it's been going to be ripped out. Because I don't want that to be respected or or be ripped up again. Then people of the community will start to get peed off because the North Norfolk Railway's not using it, nor is the Greater Anglia. So when they only use it once or twice during the summer, they're not using it on a regular day basis, and then what happens? The track gets abused, unused, and there's going to be complications. So, how do you fix a level crossing issue? Now, just remember that it's been paid for, right? Then you've got to be really useful to make it be used on a regular basis during the day. But you've got to realise you've got a Greater Anglia timetable and you've got a North Norfolk Railway timetable. What can they do? Ask a question that could be solved here. This is an answer that will spin your mind a bit. Just think about it. What can be achieved? What can the North Norfolk Railway have that the Greater Anglia could give them? A connection. Now, a connection that is very simplified to a point, right? They could give up West Runton Station, like the Greater Anglia could, right? They could give up Cromer to a point, but use it as their main terminus and connection, right? Then it makes the North Norfolk Railway have a connection in Cromer as well, but have West Runton on their timetable. So work it out. West Runton has a connection. That's a good choice, actually. By thinking about it realistically, it will help in a lot of ways and means, but it saves them from having a locomotive ticket to get across that level crossing when it's a connection that's in Cromer. The Cromer is the main terminus. The Knapford station is the main terminus. So when you think of Cromer Beach, not Cromer High, so don't get confused. The thing is that Cromer Beach, which is known as Cromer, is the main connection for Greater Anglia and the North Norfolk Railway, which makes the North Norfolk Railway have an extra station on their timetable. Now, if you look at the times of what Greater Anglia have to go through, they may be quick, they may be fast, but they don't realise what is a greater purpose. Now, I'm trying to help people out on a big note here to do it the best way they can and achieve the proof is in the pudding. The problem is knowing what to expect when you got this big, small problem, right? You got the North Norfolk Railway that's failing. Don't worry, moment, because they price is too high, and they're doing a 5 mile trip, obviously. And you've got to put yourselves in any angle. What could the level crossing do for the North Norfolk Railway as a whole, and get an extra station added to their timetable instead of the Greater Anglia? West Runton. West Runton will be North Norfolk Railway's property, so they will travel through there and Cromer, and then reverse. Then Cromer will be the main terminus for Greater Anglia as well. They don't have to go through to West Runton, right? Because West Runton as a whole is only a halt now. It's not a main station as such, but it could be an advantage to the North Norfolk Railway on a longer note. So it gives them a little bit more respect of using that level crossing. So when you look in the sky or actually thinking about it twice, you have to acknowledge what was taken from you has been given back to you, but for a price that's not even a price at all. So in the 60s, why my grandfather always stated this, Sir Topham Hatt the First, always stated that the level crossing is the key connection here. You, in all plain eyesight, the management of the North Norfolk Railway cannot go over that unless they've got a permit, right? Take away the permit. Because that's a want, not a need, right? The North Norfolk Railway needs to cross over that level crossing to go to West London and into Cromer, right? Cromer is its main connection point to get the Greater Anglia to meet up, which will be a greater asset for the West London to go back to the Midland Great Northern, or what you call the North Norfolk Railway or the North Western Railway Company, and acknowledge that that level crossing could have been used a lot more during the day. It may slow down cars as well, may I add, but it acknowledges the vital key on this. Why? Because the vital is that to make sure that that level crossing gets used more than just rusted up. I don't like to replace that track, or my family or the railway companies need to replace that track, ding, 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 all over again, and acknowledge that it could have been used all year round, and acknowledge there would be 2 more stations added to the North Norfolk Railway because Cromer will be one of their main connections. So when you think about it, this very day, a double track would be beneficial to go through from near Cromer and where the Norwich line and the actual Sheringham to West London line there, and then makes a double track point all the way into Cromer. Make it a separate entity all overall, and make a bit of a bet that will work out well, yes, but it gives the North Norfolk Railway a little bit more freedom to try and extend the line what they can't get, which they have got the connection for, but it always requires a whale, what you call a locomotive pass, right? It's what I call it. And I said, forget that. They could cross over that level crossing whenever they need, because it's a need for them. It's a need for the Greater Anglia. But the problem is the Greater Anglia is an electric train, so it would not always cross over. But the thing is, when you combine steam with the electric trains of today, right? Greater Anglia has more stations than what the North Norfolk Railway has. So how do you balance it out? Right? We know that West London is dead most of the time. We know that Sheringham doesn't need to be added because the North Norfolk Railway has theirs. And then basically they could cross over West London and go into Cromer and pick up all the passengers from there. That people that want to go to Cromer all the way to Sheringham, and they go up and they cross over that level crossing, blah blah blah, going left, right, and centre, and it just goes for. Then you have to acknowledge that money is being used. The level crossing is getting well used for its money's worth. So then you're ending up to what you're using it for every day. So when the North Norfolk Railway ending up thinking, oh, good, we've got an extra station, plus we've got a connection to Cromer, reuse it. Don't abuse it because that connection is there. And that's why they say, oh, we need a rail pass or a locomotive pass to get cross over that line. No, not just for that little piece of track. No way. Think this is all on Greater Anglia's head and the network, rail network's head, because they need to start working around it. It's really a big time, one moment in time where you have to really, all the books you read and everything you understand, people that understand me will understand me very understandably clearly, that what does the North Norfolk Railway do when they've got high prices for a 5 mile route when they could turn it into a 7 mile route? So by then, if they can't go to Milton Constable at the moment, they could go the other way. So use that head and use the thinking. It's saying, look, why are the employees of the North Norfolk Railway too scared to face the management team? Why? I got the answers they need. Why? The facts are all there. The truth is all there. Use that level crossing, because every day, if the employees start to realise the asset that that level crossing is not a monument, and you got to realise that what was taken out in the 60s should never been taken out in the 60s. There should have been a rail compromise from the British Rail there and then. Then it will be coming under a different railway act, if you like to call it correctly, to establish Cromer and West London, Sheringham, Brayborn and Holt, plus Canning Heath. Then you've got all of that in one bucket. There and then. But it didn't. So now you've got that level crossing replaced with one track. Now work out. The money's too high on the North Norfolk Railway, right? They could gain 2 miles extra, get West London and Cromer. You know I'm talking sense and not bullshit. So, realistically, think about it. The money you're asking from customers at the moment is too high. So just acknowledging that, when we acknowledge that one moment in time, think about it realistically. This is one thing that has got more value and understanding. And it's not just about the money factor. The thing is, the money can only be as good as the employer. If the employer is a load of waste of space or bullshit, as they call it, then throw him out. Don't just acknowledge. I acknowledge of your needs and what the customer's needs are. But at the same time, I'm seeing an obstacle here. What you got to be acknowledged. The price has to be right for the distance. If the distance isn't right for the price, then you screwed up. So I'm trying to help you balance it out, trying to help you to understand what is in front of you. The eyes and the ears will prove you it. Just add that 2 miles extra onto the to West London and Cromer as its main connection, and bang! Then you realise the North Norfolk Railway's got a lot more connections than you think. Connections themselves, it's not always to do with people, it's to do with the railway themselves. So when you look at the railway system of today, what stations could the North Norfolk Railway use? Right, there's multiple of them, and I'm not going to give out every one of them because, you know, using that level crossing is a blessing, but it's also have to be realised the Greater Anglia and the rail network will have to make a compromise on the North Norfolk Railway to say if you're going to charge the North, like if they jumped in, right, instead of myself or whatever, the rail network will look at their prices and they will say you're doing it too high. That's the first thing they look at. Then they say if you've got that level crossing there, use it. Right, the rail network will have to come to an agreement of using it regularly, not on an everyday basis, to realise, okay, let's check the two timetables out, and realise, okay, you Greater Anglia has a more opportunity, but they're about to extend the station, aren't they? Which I heard, and I acknowledge that as well, which I've taken into consideration. Don't bother. BS that for a moment and keep that to one side as one option. But then you've got to realise the North Norfolk Railway could have used West London into Cromer and out backwards and forth into Hull as well, and acknowledge that you probably could do that every 2 or 3 hours, something like that. And when they open, right, they could wake up, smell a coffee as they do, or they don't, because they could go either one way or other, and acknowledge that they got advantage on the main line as they do on North Norfolk Railway line. I said only a part of the main line, yes, because a lot of the majority, the Greater Anglia, are not benefiting from understanding that the West London and Cromer is the main connection point, where West London is only a halt for tourists around the globe. It's not just the North Norfolk Railway that needs to use it. But if you really look at it and really understand it, what's the catch? That there always be no catches. It's just that when you've got a level crossing in play, use it. Don't abuse it. You know what I mean? It's like saying like I could be talking for hours and hours trying to sort this out, but I don't want to be talking about this for hours. But I want it to be acknowledged because there's a there's a the proof is in the pudding, right? We have to acknowledge that, understand that, and make it quite clear. So when you got problems at the North Norfolk Railway, you got the prices as well that don't always add up with a 5 mile trip. Then you've got to realise, okay, what else have they got on the bottom line? This is what I catch them out on. Right, prices is the main key, but I'm making sure it's the top one on the priority list first. And then I've got to work out what can the Greater Anglia give up, or the rail network can give up, and give it to the North Norfolk Railway, and say, look, we can make a main connection into Cromer, right? Cromer, or Knapford as I call it, it's a connection. So when you look at it, look at what has been put in place for it to make a compromise. There's a compromisable agreeable here. Not about just the money making. This is not about money making. It's about understanding what a 5 mile trip could do if they extended it 2 miles more, which they already have. The track is already there, the railway is already there, the the locomotive permits could be whipped out because that's not. Well, we understand. We could just acknowledge that there could be advantage to this, right? There's a lot of people that will say, if that doesn't work or that doesn't work, what do you want us to go forward with? Then I will focus on the prices and drop those down because the community won't go on it unless there was a big, big thing involved in it and acknowledge why it's all cut down the way it has. You've got to say it's one moment at a time, but acknowledging everything that you see. It's not about winning. It's not about losing. It's about the bounce. Without the bounce of people that want to go, or the community that want to go on a Norfolk Railway and get the prices cheaper, but use what you got. But at the same time, you want it to be extended. So you put that level crossing in 2010, 2011, and now you've got two exit stations that could be used to the Norfolk Railway's advantage, or the NWR, and acknowledge that it's true. Like I said, it's proof is in the pudding. But if the prices are too much for you to handle, there are a lot more things in place that could be corrected here. So if you really look at that and look forward, what have you got now that could be used more of? I'm going to leave that with you and make you self aware on it, right? When things don't always go to plan all the time, they all soon add up. But the correction is there, but people or the community know it, but the railways don't. The people that run that railway, or the Greater Anglia, or the North Norfolk Railway, or the rail network, they will have to bend the rules a bit. You have to bend the rules slightly because with people's prices on the North Norfolk Railway, they won't pay that unless it's 2 miles extra, or 5 mile extra, 10 mile extra. They will say the money will be worth it then because there'll be advantage to them. You have to be very, very reasonable on it, but understand the value of money each time. When Westwanted and Cromer being the main terminus, which is what I want it to be, to acknowledge that they can still go through Holt without having to with crossing over the time to the level crossing, and acknowledge it's not there as a monument. It has to be used. It's like saying if you are willing to have that level crossing to be used during the day, every day, you have to acknowledge what the Norfolk Railway needs to do and acknowledge the prices will be. Obviously, you can look up in my prices podcast that I did and acknowledge that what what to expect is what you need to know about. But at the same time, there's a big barrier. A proof is in the pudding, right? And you're getting the truth out of my mouth, not the bullshit. So if you really are like understanding where I'm coming from and logically understand that I know that railway inside and out, I said I know about that railway and I know what their needs are and wants, but they can't have it as full price the way they ask for. But the reality of the level crossing in general should have been used a lot more. I don't want to see that rusted up. You see, we have to start thinking, well, the Greater Anglia are not using it. The Greater Anglia doesn't come back until every hour or 2 hours. They've got two trains going down into Cromer to Norwich. I said every time they crisscross, crisscross, I said, why don't you just make your mark in Cromer and then the North Norfolk where they can have restaurants and for nothing and then have a connection in Cromer for them. So work it out. There's a not a bargaining chip here. It's about a compromise and an understanding what the North Norfolk Railway could do right now to their advantage and realise if we're going to increase those prices to that extent, there needs to be a tourist, another area like Cromer and West London to be the North Norfolk Railway's terminus. But Cromer will be the main terminus for both companies, the Greater Anglia and the North Norfolk Railway. It's the vital key in all of this. It's the understanding, and it's vital that the terminus between Cromer and Norwich may be still there, but the thing is, that's the North Norfolk Railway's last departure, last arrival and departure area is Cromer, right? So Cromer needs to be used when it's not used. You got to realise the North Norfolk Railway could use West London in every angle. I remember a private connection told me one strict rule on this to acknowledge that when you got a level crossing in play, use it, don't abuse it. Because it's the one way of saying if you're abusing it and let it stand there, whatever, people's cars will go in, out like it always do. And you're not realizing it's not even used by a train or a locomotive or electric train or anything. And no one's actually realizing that it could be used more and more and more during the year. Then there'll be two more stations where I think you may find out there'll be a Christmas little special there in between where West London could have Christmas decks and everything else, and then have Cromer do the same. This is all hypothetical, but it can actually be done if it's done correctly. Then West London, Cromer will have Christmas decks, Christmas trees, and so forth, and make it a little bit extended line, 2 miles for the North Norfolk Railway, but it'd be worthwhile because you're extending the line by that mileage, only 2 miles. That's all it is, and you're acknowledging it because you're making sure of the customer's needs, not wants. But then the prices could be just about right for those two extra stations. But for 5 miles, which they have right now, which is Sheringham to Holt, right? That's what the North Norfolk Railway has. The prices are too pricey right now. The more miles they do, the more the price goes up. If they're only doing 5 miles, leave the set prices as they are before it went up. So work it out backwards and then go forwards again. Then then you're thinking, okay, you've got that level crossing. I keep telling people about it. It is important to use it. Don't abuse it because there's a lot more to it. There's one moment in time when people would give up their lives to let that be used, right? But I'm not. I'm trying to help people out to gain where they have to be in any way, in any direction and form. And you got to look at it. It's not a monument. It's not. It's not a way of what you would expect of it to be there as a monument. No, and it's not an easy thing to gain or achieve or understand where they're coming from. You have to be realistic on what is a need and understand their needs. The community needs to start thinking. and then everybody will say the whole thing was there. It's all about what people's needs are and wants. It's understanding that little bridge. This is why the North Norfolk Railway don't give a shit at the moment. Excuse my language. They only care about the money factor. I said, don't raise those prices up just for 3 stations, main stations, which is Sheringham, Rayborn, and Holt. No, you got to be realistic about the distance. The distance calculates the value of money. And in the day, it's not during the day, during the summer, you might get away with it a little bit more because being summertime, it'd be more populated. But during the winter, no. Autumn, average rise, spring, average rise. So when you really calculate it in your mind, it's not about the value of the cost, it's the value of time and sitting time and duration during the mileage. And when your mileage is really calculated in time, you add up how long does it take to get from Sheringham to Rayborn, right? Then it will cross the path with you. And I want you to think about this very, very clearly. It's 5 miles, so it's like 2.5 by 2.5 equals 5 miles. But you've got only 3 stations and 1 halt, right? Then it will make more sense to you in the end of the day. So when you got a level crossing that's standing there like a monument, not being used correctly, I said if you got it there, use it. Don't abuse it. So when we look into this, I said there will be things that will obstacle you out. And you're thinking money goes up and up and up. It doesn't matter about the electric and water. The problem is you're making profit on the food and water because you're making more money on the food and water because that's what people go for most of the time. Right? You have to realize that what has been said is true, but then you've got to be realistic on what has been said. Right? So you have to backtrack and go forward. I don't like to babble on, but the thing is, the whole thing is to get you saying one moment in time. There has always be a pro and a con. So if the pro was more active, right? I was taking this as a point of course, obviously, and acknowledgement, obviously, that the railway has to start prioritising because the railway cannot have those high prices just for the customers. The community will see it as a right flaw in their mistakes. So if you acknowledge you got a level crossing that can't be used right now, and you've basically got a 5 mile route, then you've got to think about okay, you want all of this money coming through, drop it down first. That's a major key. This is why I talked about this in the podcast prices. And this is why I acknowledge to you in the first place of how much they're asking for from you when you get on that platform. So when you acknowledge now, this is a totally different subject. It's the level crossing itself, right? The level crossing is not there for a monument. It's got to be used, but there's got to be a compromise with rail network that could be used all year round without having to ask them too much. Because you want to use the locomotive ticket, as they call it, a lot more than what it is. It's like saying, oh yeah, well, we could do a King's Cross all the way to Holt for £200. Right? Can you see where I'm getting at. Why there is so much problem with the Norfolk Railway and they can't see the real McCoy problem. Right in front of their eyes. They could add two more stations added to their list. Right? Be more realistic. Be fact. Be logical. Be. This is not fiction. This is reality of what is supposed to be acknowledged for you to understand. Okay, we understand that. We understood that, or we got a clear to that. Yes, I can understand where you're coming from. The logical fact is that the Greater Anglia is abusing West Wanton and Cromer stations as they are because they're abusing the system because they're adding another hole on the other side of that platform or their level crossing and they're paying more and more for their locomotives. I said, let's get that. Let's get it straight to the T, right? When you think of West Wanton and think about Cromer, right? Cromer gets very busy in the summertime, right? And I'm not bullshitting the bush on this one, but it could be a high advantage for the Norfolk Railway to take advantage on that and say, let's make that our main connection to our main terminus to access as a connection point for Norwich. But we don't. The Norfolk Railway won't be going to Norwich. It'd be the Greater Anglia. And that'd be their main connection. Ding, 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 in and out, in and out, in and out. But during the day, that'd be a lot easier for them because the North Norfolk Railway will have West Wanton. West Wanton is only a golf course area. It's only a Blinks Hotel area. Acknowledge that. And they got an 18 hole or 19 hole, and bang. When you think about it, it'd be in the best interest for the North Norfolk Railway to have the 2 mile extras standard because it'd be the right price for what they asked you for. So when you really think about it, it's logical. It's not. It's not unexcusable, but it's actually making more sense that you right. The North Norfolk Railway has got a disadvantage, right, because of their prices. Just what just hear that podcast prices for the Rise of the Hatch prices, and you'll understand why. When you look at those prices, that's what they're setting it, right? But if you add 2 more miles to that, that will cover that price. So, what is the North Norfolk Railway going to do until they get their connection to Milton Constable, which will make their prices worthwhile? Right now, they're only doing 5 miles, so keep that in mind. So there's 2.5 against 2.5. And that ends up in the distance, and even that, the mileage, then it adds up and it adds up, right? A lot of people know that it's too pricey right now because they need, the community understands it quite well. There's 8 billion people that know this. They say, just for a 5 mile trip, look, if you look at the Norfolk Railway Company, which is basically near further, not near the coast, they're doing extra mileages, right? More mileage, right? Their prices will probably be right for the miles they're doing. With the North Norfolk Railway that's doing 5, the North Norfolk Railway, its counterpart, bing bing, too high. If I'm going to pay that price, I'd rather do it on a bigger railway line, right? So I'm giving you a bit of a doubt of the outside from the inside of where the company is going wrong or the organisation that's going wrong. You have to be acknowledged of what has been unfolded. So acknowledge the prices are the key, the level crossing is the key, and 2 stations that could be added will make Cromer the main terminus and connection point. And then it all adds up. but the prices that the North Norfolk Railway are asking from you today is nearly like 2 miles worth extra. Equalise it. So when you got 5, 2 more added, that would have cost what they're asking for, because you're benefiting it, because the customers or the community can get to from from Holt all the way into Cromer with no hesitation. But at the moment, they've got a bridge between Greater Anglia and the rail network, or Network Rail, and the North Norfolk Railway. They will have to make a compromise through that level crossing. Use it, don't abuse it. Because in the day, they will end up realizing that connection is there for them, for the North Norfolk Railway. So if you work it out, that connection could get them into West London, it could get them into Cromer, and reverse it. So when you look at it, who's benefiting it right now? No one. So no one is benefiting from it. So when you look down and look at their map, or you look at the railway map, it makes sense and logic, and the value of money and cost will be just about right by then. But when you're talking about Melton Constable itself, then the money will be worth it, because the money will be the right price for the right mileage. So when you got the mileage and the money, you talk about mileage first, then the prices, then you're adding up what could have been the easiest option, as I stated. If they didn't take it out in the first place, the North Norfolk Railway would have had more of a compromise right now, and equalisation. It's called what you call a compromise, to say, let's make Cromer the main terminus for the connection points, because you're going from from Holt into Cromer. That's the North Norfolk Railway line, and then you're basically getting the connection from the other line from Norwich all the way into Cromer. And it's that main key element, establish a point where it all makes sense in the end. This is not bullshit. So if you think this is all bullshit to you, I won't accept no bullshit from no one. I'm always straight to the point, the elements and the costs and the price and the level crossing itself. Don't abuse that level crossing, because I never seen it being abused for a long, long time. So it's there, but it's not being used. So just think about it logically. It's there, start using it, don't abuse it. The greater angler will have to make a compromise to say, okay, we can combine our timetables with yours and see where we can squeeze in that connection point or cross, and acknowledge to from a reality point of view, it's like understanding the value of the money that you're asking from customers. Like the greater angler will look into your prices as example, which I'll go, and they will think, no, you're charging them too much for 5 miles. Because it's like a 2 mile trip with a point 0.5 on the end, plus 2 times 2 equals 5 miles. So work it out in your mind. How much are you benefiting for just sitting down for 2 or 5 minutes? You've got to be realistic. So do check the prices podcast and then come back onto this one. You will understand everything that's unfolding. Like I said, the proof is in the pudding, but one moment in time, my grandfather knew exactly what he was doing. Sir Topham Hatt the first. Thank you very much.